brings your innermost desires to life. If deep down inside you're a little repressed and a hopeless romantic, you become some sort of a...
Third mate, best one you can find.
love crazy wild man.
Towards the end of the 1980s, Dark Horse founder Mike Richardson was convinced he had found the perfect springboard to adapt one of the comics they were publishing, The Mask, into a feature film. See, Hollywood had been making so many Nightmare on Elm Street movies that Richardson was convinced they could just make a movie about another freaky dude and sneak it in. The Mask comic depicted a freaky green-headed dude who liked to murder people, and that quick overview of the comic was close enough for people to think it was a good idea to adapt it. However, making the Mask movie took a lot longer than expected, and the movie started to morph the longer it took, in the process changing the trajectory of the series from then on. It's interesting to look back and see when and where they made changes to the comic book in order to get the movie as good as they could, especially since not following the source material has been made illegal today. Well, okay, you can change things from the source material, but I would make a 3-hour video about why it was different from the source material and how it didn't necessarily have to be the same, but because it wasn't the same, it was bad. And partly because the changes ended up making The Mask work so well. It turned the movie into a fun comedy with this sort of warped Superman thing going on. I just watched it the other day again for the first time in a long time, and I thought it would be a fun one to revisit. There's a bunch of stories surrounding the making of it that if you've researched the film before, you've probably heard, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but I'm also going to talk about the history of making the movie and why I like the movie so much. This is the Ssssmokin! When it came to adapting the Mask comic, the crew wanted to make sure they got one thing right: that a guy with a normal head would turn into a guy with a green head. Everything else about the comic was pretty much optional. But Richardson was a part of the process, and helping steer the ship away from the original comic in order to get a good movie out of it. So when they couldn't really get a horror film to work for The Mask, and director Chuck Russell told Josh Weiss, for his amazing oral history for Forbes, that all of the horror ideas basically went out the door that Jim Carrey walked through.
The sexy, the incomparable, Tom Jones!
They could no longer make a horror movie with a man out there who moved so funnily. And Jim Carrey wasn't even a known entity. Russell told Weiss that he was just a funny guy that they thought needed the spotlight. In a similar move, they rewrote the character of Tina from being the femme fatale she was in the original script to being a more straightforward love interest because they realized that too many people were going to fall in love with Cameron Diaz, who was also an unknown entity at the time. They were willing to sacrifice certain plot elements and ideas from the comics because they wanted to give their actors the best vehicle they could. The focus wasn't on retelling a good story, it was on telling a good story. And while these decisions may have come at the cost of Richardson's original book, they didn't come at the cost of their reflection of Richardson. When the horror element that was supposed to be the selling point fell away, Richardson replaced it with another one of his loves: Tex Avery cartoons.
I want a diamond ring, I want some bracelets and everything. Daddy, you better get the best for me.
It's why Stanley Ipkiss has such a love for cartoons, why his hidden persona in The Mask is a living cartoon, why the whole film sort of has this 40s aesthetic feel to it, and why we got the Cuban Pete sequence.
Senorita, I know that you would like a jiggy.
The entire crew was basically eye-guzzling Tex Avery cartoons during production, and using that love to fuel the story that they were trying to tell, and pay homage to the cartoons that Richardson loved so much. I think that genuine homage is what grounded a lot of The Mask, which could have been just pure insanity if it wasn't working to respect something that came before it. It was also a decision that made the role perfect for Jim Carrey, as it gave him the chance to turn into, as Chuck Russell told the Chicago Tribune, a living cartoon.
The real magic of a man becoming sort of a human Looney Tune, and yet it become photoreal. Not a cartoon, but in fact something that looks like it's existing and speaking in this reality in flesh and blood. It can only be done through computer graphics.
The interview also saw Russell talking about how Carrey was the basis for the film's groundbreaking visual effects. Even today, the effects are fantastic, balancing themselves well between the real world they're operating in and the cartoons they're trying to imitate. It's just endlessly fascinating how that was what was marketable in the past, but today what's marketable is different. One of the crazy side effects of time travel, I suppose. Because The Mask isn't some indie darling made by a bunch of people who cared nothing about marketability. All the changes made to The Mask were made to make it fit better in the movie landscape at the time. They were trying to be the movie that put you onto two premium pretty people, because that's what the movie industry was still running on at the time, big name. It was still good though, because they cared about what they were making, and made sure to make their changes carefully when they were trying to make the film more marketable. Like when they shifted the movie from a horror to a comedy, they actually changed the origin of the mask to be from the god Loki, because they figured that that was a better origin for a funnier version of the character. If the mask was made today with the same crew, I would bet that that crew would focus a little bit more on iconic imagery from the comic, just because now it's a little bit more marketable to show things from comics. But less like Marvel and DC stuff, and more like The Boys or Invincible, where the creative team have an eye for marketability, but also really care about telling a good story. I could also just see the 3-hour video I would make about why the comic is better or worse than whatever we care about now. As I said earlier, it felt to me like a sort of comedic homage to early Superman stuff. Stanley Ipkiss was Clark Kent if Clark wasn't faking the whole clumsy bumbling thing.
Kind of an ordinary, everyday guy who gets run over, nice guy, gets run over by everybody he's involved with, and he finds this mask with a curse on it.
The Mask, in turn, was a Superman whose first two actions after declaring himself a superhero are to shove car parts up mechanics and rob a bank.
He becomes the guy who has all the answers, or who can never be hurt. He's impenetrable, and he's just, he's the guy that everybody would love to be when they're faced with a situation when somebody's going, "You got a problem, man?"
The Lois Lane of the story ended up not being the nosy reporter, but the villain's girlfriend, Tina Carlisle.
She's sort of the glamorous gal with the gangster boyfriend who treats her really well, but sooner or later she kind of figures out that he's not just a tough guy, he's a murderer, a killer, and it starts to get to her.
She's the one who ends up falling for both sides of the mask, although she admittedly isn't as into the guy with the big green head once he starts coming onto her. The nosy reporter actually ended up betraying Stanley to the film's Lex Luthor, Dorian Tyrell, who was actually not a big, powerful boss man, instead being used pretty early in the film as a golf tee by a bigger, badder villain. And Stanley's Jimmy Olsen Charlie may have been just as loyal a friend, although he cared a lot more about women than he did basically anything else ever happening.
Because Charlie is a really cool, doesn't worry about anything, kind of out there chasing after the babe.
Kellaway and Doyle were fun because, like in most superhero movies, they were cops who were ineffective to the point of hilarity. But the hilarity this time was on purpose. Whereas in real life, the ineffectiveness is just kind of sad. The idea that Stanley's repressed side was a literal cartoon character worked on a lot of levels for the film. Carrey obviously milked his physicality for all it was worth, and the team at ILM working on the visual effects, as well as the makeup effects, effects artist Greg Canham sell everything with how the mask's speed and item spawning are depicted. But it all also said something about Stanley and who he thought he was supposed to be. In the film, he described himself as a repressed romantic and thought putting on the mask gave him confidence and seductive mystique. In reality, the mask was too thoughtless and chaotic to ever be an effective romantic, and ended up not furthering Stanley's life in any way. Stanley just thought that he was such a horrible person that being a guy with a big green head who howls like a wolf when he sees a woman and then doesn't seem to get any signs ever when he actually comes onto her was better than being himself.
Oh, it's a metaphor.
But while the mask could tear up the Copacabana Club with Tina, he wasn't nearly as effective in one-on-one conversations. That's why it was so important that Stanley was able to defeat the film's villain without the mask, and in the end parted ways with the mask because he learned he was enough. The mask was powerful, and it definitely turned Stanley into something different, just not something better. And Stanley never was going to get better while he was hiding himself in the mask. When talking to WEISS, Russell compared watching the first screening to winning the high school football game. He was so excited. And a quote from Craig Stearns from the same article puts it better than I ever could. It is a moment in film history, so to speak, where this thing popped up and for some reason everything just sort of clicked. The costumes and the new actors and ILM wanting to be involved with it, and Chuck Russell's direction and the dancing. Sometimes things just click, and there are other movies that have a lot more money and time and they just go to put it together and it just doesn't work. You have your flops, so it's hard to predict why that happens. The Mask was a surprise, and the team was almost all ready to keep going. Richardson told WEISS he had ideas to do a romp in Las Vegas with Stanley back in the mask. Russell said that he had ideas of putting Diaz in the mask, or maybe a baby, but that it all hinged on Jim coming back. Because the downside of the film's humongous popularity was that it worked perfectly as what it was designed to be. A vehicle for Jim Carrey's comedy. Not to say that Jim Carrey was fully responsible for the movie's success, just that once they had merged Jim Carrey and The Mask, they kind of became inseparable conceptually. The comics had seen multiple different people take on The Mask, but none of them were trying to step in the shoes of Jim Carrey. And while a lot of the crew had hopes that another comedian could take the reins if needed, nobody was really sure who could follow Jim. And Jim Carrey just wasn't interested in doing another one. A lot of different things have been said about why he wouldn't have done it over the years. At first it was his experience with the Ace Ventura sequels, then it was that he had done The Grinch and the green makeup had a bad effect on him and turned him off to green makeup. It's only just recently that we've even gotten hope of him coming back for The Mask 2. Even then, he also keeps saying he's gonna quit acting altogether. So rather than do a sequel right after the first movie, they turned to doing an animated series, which actually ran for an impressively long time.
Somebody stop me!
It obviously wasn't the blockbuster hit that the movie was, mostly because it wasn't a movie. But it was a fun cartoon, and it had a stacked voice cast. It took out Tina and rolled back Stanley's character development son to basically give viewers the chance to spend more time in the middle of the movie, when the mask is just kind of running around doing stuff.
Guys, this is nothing personal, really.
But this mask was also more like a superhero, with his own supervillain and Freaks of the Week. It was probably the best way to capitalize on the movie's success when they couldn't get Jim Carrey back, as an actual cartoon probably had the best chance of keeping up with him. They also had an SNES game that I remember being a lot of fun when I was going around absorbing all the Mask content I could as a kid. Actually, you know what? I have to get B-roll of the game for this section of the video anyways. You might as well hang out with me while I'm doing that. Unless you have something better to do. I'm kidding. It's the middle of my video. You shouldn't have something better to do. You were gonna watch till the end, right? Well, let's see if this game's any fun. Edge City, a villainous hive of scum and wretched throw-up. It's me, the Mask. Hello. My version of the Mask is a much deeper, can't follow Jim Carrey, you know? Okay, this guy's throwing a cat at me, and that's... How do you murder the cat? I'm out of here! Ah, my one weakness. A cat. Yeah, stop and pose. Stop and pose. Ooh, an M. Tornado mode! This wall is impervious to tornadoes. Oh, that's cute. It does little animations when you sit still for long enough. My other weakness. Gun violence in America. Sneak by. Ooh, can't catch me. Ooh, can't catch me because I'm sneaky like that. You're just mad. You're just mad because you can't touch your toes. You should do yoga more, buddy. I have a horn. This game's gotten okay. Hup, 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 hup. Yeah, can't get me behind this wall. I figured it out. Oop. Hey, but oh fuck. Why'd I do that? I can't get back in. Ha ha ha. You stupid idiot. I'm running out of masky points. Okay. Ooh. Why does he have bowling balls? What? Wait, what? Where do I live? What the hell? He is so powerful. Is this not the right way? I don't even beat level 1. Okay, come on. Enough fucking around. Fuck it. Gotta be a way out of here. Somebody stop me. He is dead. Smoking! Throw what you want at me now, game. People are trying to fucking sleep. It's her! Why is she friends with the clock? She's supposed to not like the clock. The clock is my friend. I can't game over again. No! Because the problem is I've now stated a pretty clear intention to get past level 1. So the video would kind of feel incomplete if I didn't get past level 1. Well, maybe just give me a minute here with the game. Just a minute. Okay, I made it to level 2. The game didn't make me cry, if that's what you're asking me. It's good. It's a fun version of the mask. The game was probably most famous, though, for being the reason that Nintendo Power had anything to do with the mask, and why they were promoting the Mask 2 in their magazine with a sweepstakes for a kid to come visit and see the set of the Mask 2. This was all obviously before anybody realized Jim Carrey wouldn't be coming back. Tony Ponce from Destructoid.com actually got a chance to talk to the winner, who said that despite the false promise, he was updated consistently about new developments and eventually given an official Mask 2 jacket, a bunch of SNES games, and $5,000. Which, in the funniest part of the article, he said he was happy to get over an eventual ticket to visit the set of Son of the Mask starring Jamie Kennedy. So that was The Mask. A fun adaptation, sort of because it wasn't an accurate one. But I think because they made the decision early on not to be accurate and instead focus on a new vision with new ideas, they just ended up with a great comedy. A person might even make the argument that The Mask is a better adaptation of Tex Avery cartoons than it is its source material, but whatever it is, it's great. Although I have no idea what that says about what adaptation should be today. Because I feel like there is more a focus on being respectful or at least aware of the source material, but you know, it's just in the same way that at the time The Mask was made, movies were trying harder to be vehicles for celebrities, or soon-to-be celebrities. Now movies are trying hard to please people who know what they're about already. The Spider-Verse movies are a pretty good example of this now. They're adapting, although actually they're another good example about how changing an adaptation is good. I don't even, this part's not really scripted, so I guess that's why the example's not as good. We'll use it anyways. I think the Spider-Verse movies are a good example of how an adaptation like The Mask would work today. It's just that the marketability aspects are now about what they include from the larger Spider-Man universe, but they still make a ton of changes to their source material in trying to make the best movie. Alright, even I'm losing track of my point. Go watch The Mask. It's a good movie, and I had fun watching it. Okay, that was my Mask video. I'm gonna go light fire to some leaves I found on the sidewalk.